Hey, what's up, you guys? It is Kat, and welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Art of Consulting podcast. Today, we're actually diving into the world of process modeling and project management with a very special guest whose expertise is transforming the way companies operate and innovate. Our guest today is none other than Mr. Ed Matera, project management professional, and I dare say is synonymous with excellence in process modeling and project management. Ed has a prolific career marked by his roles as a book author, conference speaker, tutor, and senior project manager currently at Canadian Western Bank. And he's also the brains behind processmodelingadvisor.com, which is a platform dedicated to advancing the practice of process modeling. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kat. Nice to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Ed, you've had a fascinating journey, one that's been taking you from educating future talents at NAIT to leading major projects at Canadian Western Bank and beyond. And I know that you you wrote a groundbreaking book, actually, the Universal Process Modeling Procedure. And prior to us coming onto the air in one of our preliminary conversations, you had introduced me to it, the concept of Prince 2. So there's a lot we can talk about
There sure
today,
is.
right? And so I thought that we should let's start with, can you tell us more about Prince 2 and particularly there's something special about the Prince 2 methodology. First of all, what is it and what makes it so special that it makes it effective as opposed to other types of methodologies?
Sure. So we're all familiar with the Project Management Institute and its body of knowledge. And Prince
Sure.
2 is more or less its equivalent based in England. And they are both methodologies for project management, whereas PMI has 12 principles, Prince 2 has 7 philosophies. They're roughly equivalent. What is the difference? Prince 2 is a little bit more prescriptive. And, essentially, if you get the guide called Managing Successful Projects with Prince 2, you'll read it and you'll find that it's a bit more prescriptive than the PMI body of knowledge. Having said that, what's the primary difference for me is that Prince 2 has a principle called focus on products.
Okay.
And I became a Prince 2 certified practitioner many years ago and PMI, PMP many years ago. And I would say that the focus on products philosophy basically was a game changer for me as a project manager. So you still do all of these activities that PMI, PMPs are familiar with, but Prince 2, because of its philosophy of focus on products, it has made my work far more successful. And in fact,
Interesting.
yes. And in fact, I believe that one of the first sentences in the uh, Prince 2 guide is that a successful project is product focused, not activity focused. And
Okay,
that
that's
drives
interesting.
everything else.
That's right. That's right. And one of the first, so that's interesting that and fascinating actually, because the one of the key principles of actually having even a successful business is not actually it is to understand who matters at the end of the day and what matters at the end of the day. And I feel like what you just told me is very synonymous to that. Like in a business, who matters? It's your customers who matter. It's the end product. It's not necessarily the end product for the customers, it's the customers themselves. So from from a project management point of view, we're actually literally changing the sort of the focus on managing a bunch of tasks and a bunch of people in order to meet a certain deadline for with a certain budget, but actually the end result, the whole entire point of having a project.
Yes. And of course, other skills come to play like emotional intelligence, customer service, etc. But imagine running a project to deliver something to your client. And, the ultimate end goal is clear, perhaps. Um, there will be a number of incremental products that get us there. So within your project team, there are incremental value adding rather than activities, products that get us there. And that has a big role to play in the effectiveness and productivity of your delivery team that ultimately delivers the final product and results to the client.
Okay. So
And go ahead.
before we get a little bit too, before we get, it's a little bit ambiguous to me, like all of these concepts of focus and product versus, let's take a practical example. So let's set up a stage. We've got a project to implement a mobile application. The
Mhm.
end user group is perhaps, what's a good mobile app? Help me out here.
Well, eventually you're going to deploy it into the market, right?
Sure.
So you're going to
Okay.
have an application. That's ultimately the product, and you're going
Right.
to deploy it into the market. So how
Okay.
do you get there,
Hmm.
right? Your project will go through a life cycle, and we're all familiar with phases and those kinds of things. Rather than talking about that, I like to think about the life cycle of the project in terms of its products that will be delivered from start to the finish. So at the beginning of delivering a mobile app, you may not even fully understand the requirements. You may not have the design yet. You're going to have to do some software configuration or development. You're going to have to do some testing. And there will be some other activities that lead to launching it into the market. So everything I just described is familiar to many people as activities or phases. When
Yeah.
I look at a project, my interest is, for example, do we have a requirement specification? Is that done yet? Do we have the design complete? Is that done yet? Do we have a design spec, for example? Do
Right.
we have the configured application ready for testing? Do we have the deployable product ready to deploy? And furthermore, whether you're using an agile approach or a waterfall methodology doesn't matter.
Hmm.
You can iteratively develop a product. You can waterfall a project so that it leads to the ultimate product. So
Hmm.
I try to name everything in my project with a noun, and that drives me to think of it as a product. If I turn to a
Okay.
so if I turn to one of the specialists in my project, like a business analyst or a
Hmm.
developer, a tester, a marketing person, or a change management specialist, I get them focused on producing their specialist products.
Okay. So like the deliverables, you actually is essentially each of the internal products of the
For the
project, if
project.
you
Yes,
will. Okay, that's
exactly. And your
interesting.
word deliverables is a good one because, you can roughly equate that, but many
Mm,
people sort of shy away from that or they're intimidated by it or they feel it's sort of like a consulting or vendor kind of thing. But really
okay.
internal to the project team, I like my team to be very clear on which products each of the specialists in my team are responsible for delivering to the team.
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
that makes it easy for me because they are the specialists in what they do. I just have to make it clear what their product is, and we agree on that.
Right.
And then everything drives towards that. It influences the way we define the project lifecycle, assign responsibilities, pla- what activities they plan for themselves.
Mm.
How do we build an integrated end-to-end work breakdown structure and schedule? How we establish credible estimates. You can imagine if I turn to a specialist and our agenda on estimation is on that specific product within our project, they're in a really good place to tell me what they think it's going to take because they're familiar
Okay.
with what they're going to produce for me. And then as the
Gotcha.
project executes, just quickly, it
Hmm.
drives our agenda in terms of intra-project communications. The agendas for status meetings or stand-up meetings is not focused on what did you do this week or what did you do yesterday. It's focused on how have you progressed to your completion of your assigned product. And
Oh
I'm famous
my.
for what being saying, rhetorically, I'm famous for walking around and asking people, "Is it done yet?" And depending on who I'm speaking to, our conversation's pretty clear because we pretty much have an agreement on what it is, one of the products that they're responsible for delivering to the project.
Hmm.
And it's very easy then for them to tell me their progress based on, their product's completion status rather than activities they performed in a given period. It's very easy to focus on issue management and and resolution, because what's holding us up from getting this product completed as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, other agendas. And, that's where that's really a key value add. It's easy to develop a project plan and schedule and get your team going. It's hard to finish on schedule and on time and manage
Mm-hmm.
the issues. And so I find the focus on products actually helps me to focus the communication agenda throughout the project lifecycle with me and each of the specialists in a project, because we all understand what each of their products are and
Mm-hmm.
what they're committed to deliver to the project. And finally, I'll say, even in closing a project, I give credit, high fives, rewards to recognize their accomplishments by reiterating what they delivered to the project in terms of products. This back to the mobile app. This particular marketing specialist delivered a smashing marketing campaign, or internally, typically in an organization like a bank, for example, this change management specialist knocked it out of the park with the communications that was delivered, with the learning or training that was deployed. And communications is thought of not as a verb, nor as training. It's thought of as specific products. And so by
Okay,
the end,
go ahead. You can finish your thought.
so the final thing is, by the end of a project, it's very easy to give credit to project team members who have completed products that have added value to the ultimate product, to the outside customer, which is that new
Mm-hmm.
application, that puts a smile on their face, or successfully deployed into a market, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right. Okay, that's fascinating. Just that one little distinction actually refocuses the whole entire project team, not necessarily on the tasks and the activities within that project, because you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, I've been on countless project teams where we're so focused on just the activity, like what did you do yesterday, what's on your plate today, and then any sort of blockers, and that's kind of it. And so you lose sight of it, of what that finished end product would be. And I mean, in that case, like we're always working together to build that ultimate end product. So you've spoken about the happy path. Fantastic. What happens when things go wrong?
Well, I use focus on products throughout the execution of a project. And like I said just a few moments ago, it's fairly straightforward to be able to develop a great plan. And as soon as a project begins to execute, really the role of the project manager is to manage risks and issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can have a focused conversation with any of the specialists on the project, because that specialist may be assigned to deliver an intra-project product, like a spec, a test plan, a software module. And if it's not going as well as we had hoped, it's usually due to, a decision is required, or I need help. And I can
Mm,
focus that conversation on with that specialist, and ask what help is needed, what decision is needed to complete your project or get it moving forward more quickly. And by the way, in a stand-up meeting or in a weekly checkpoint meeting, you're typically there with other specialists in the room, but the agenda is focused on each individual's products. So if one of the individuals raises their hand and says, well, I didn't really get done what I wanted to this week because either I've got other commitments, or I don't know, how it's to be done or whatever. Really, the agenda is around a specific product. And we can have the team that's in that discussion can contribute to what's known as the pool of knowledge,
mhm,
and they can help to contribute ideas and help focused on helping that individual specialist get their particular product completed.
okay.
Whereas in another context, if you didn't have that focus, people might tend to say, well, let's have another meeting.
That's true. Yeah, let's follow up this discussion, which I mean, kind of has to happen, don't you think?
And then again, I would say that, the purpose of any given meeting is focused on one or another product, or if the project is executing, on the issue or decision that's necessary to achieve that product. I got off a call this morning where on one of my projects, there was a realization that we needed some additional work performed by an outside vendor that had not
Mm-hmm.
been planned or budgeted for.
Hmm.
And, it basically comes down to narrowing what is that vendor going to deliver into our project as a product, right? It turned out to be some converted data.
Hmm.
but we, productized it basically. And we have a price for it. And I'm having a meeting with some executives on Monday, and that's the issue. It's not a question of I want more money or I need a budget or whatever. It's this product will need to be delivered into the project by this point in time. It's going to cost about this much. We're ready to go with the vendor. I need your approval for budget or the expenditure. And it's going to be a
Mm,
pretty simple conversation. They're
right.
not going to be concerned about, well, who are you hiring? How long is it
Mm,
going to take? How many resources are you going to use? These are all conversations you could have, but all of we really
mm,
need to talk about is to get this intra-project product into the project and have it completed in the appropriate time in the project. I've done the work. It's going to cost about this much. Can you approve it? Yes or no? And they're going to see the value in the product and its contribution to the end goal. And I think
hmm.
it's going to be a pretty simple conversation.
Because you've already spelt it out with them by illustrating what that end result already is.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So that was one of my next questions actually is dependencies. And so like consider if you will in a project we're all like in the example that you just cited we need an external vendor. The product that they need to deliver is some missing converted data that is going to impact downstream other products.
Um,
How do you manage what happens downstream in order to make sure that we're still delivering on time? Or like what happens? I'll ask that question later.
yes. So
One at a time.
that's a great question. And the principle of time management or schedule management is the same regardless of what project management methodology you're using. But again, the focus is different. If I establish a work breakdown structure and a schedule from front to back, and it's a series of products, some of those products are being created in parallel with other products,
Hmm.
and so on. And the critical path is still clear. There may be clear dependencies from one product to the next, leading to a go live or a deployment. And there are other products that are prepared in parallel. So if something is slipping, if one of the products is slipping in its delivery, one of the simple questions is, does it matter? Is it on the critical path?
Mm,
Do we have to focus really hard on getting this product completed on schedule? Because if we don't, it will delay or lengthen the critical path. So the principle of critical path is similar, but the what you're focusing the critical path of is on products rather than, oh, we're going to finish this phase or you're going to finish this activity. It's not enigmatic anymore. You either have the
hmm.
product ready to go that you're contributing to the project or you don't.
Right.
So that's how it fits in with critical path. And that's how also the agenda of communicating issues and risks and resolving them, uh, where focus on products helps you to focus that conversation with the specialists and focus on the right conversation. Is it done yet? Is answered by what it is between you and me. And does it matter to do something now and get all excited and spend more money or effort is answered by, is it on the critical path? Can we
Mm,
take a little longer? And just last week, there was a project that went live into production operations, and there was one product, a piece of documentation that was not ready to go by the go live weekend. And essentially, it came down to, so does that matter? Does that impact the value to the customer of this software that's being deployed? And the answer was no. Yes, there's some operations management impact, and perhaps we can clean that up afterwards. And that product will be delivered a little later, but it's not important enough to hold up the critical path and the go live deployment.
so I feel okay. So my next question was, what if somebody delivers a crappy product? And then you're going to say, does it matter? Is it on the critical path? If yes, okay, so if no, then who cares? But if yes, what happens?
Well, product oriented planning has already occurred. So I'll ask the specialist who's assigned to produce that product. Um, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I don't know how many meetings you need. I don't know how, et cetera, et cetera. And if I feel they have confidence in how they're going to deliver that product to the project, I'll just simply ask them for their estimate for duration and have some confidence that will hit that date. If it's a complex product and I have a sense that there's risk in delivering it, I might add some contingency to that product's duration in the project schedule. And there are times when our project team may be producing a product or one of the products that they've never produced before. And so that means there's a little bit of risk and we're not quite sure exactly how we're going to do it, or we're not that practiced at it. And so I might help the specialist to tell me what steps they're going to take. And generally speaking, they're going to produce it. We'll have to spend some time reviewing it and QAing it. And if you review it and QA it, that means you're going to have to account for some rework effort and eventually get it to end of completion. And even then, if we perceive there's some risk, we'll add some contingency to its duration. So I don't try to understand too much about how the specialist who was assigned will do their job to deliver their product. But where I sense that there's high risk, or it's a new product, or they're maybe not as experienced as they could be, then we'll account for that in the estimation of the duration, and we'll account for some rework effort and perhaps also some contingency.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So one of my other questions was, in one of my previous clients, there was a lot of resource overlap. And what I mean by resource overlap is the same bunch of people were responsible for different products, right? And so then we got into a situation where we're focusing on this one thing, and then all of a sudden we're like, no, 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 we have to drop what we have to do and then do this other thing. And then you have all of these different balls in the air, and how do you manage that and make sure that your products
Here's
are
why.
finished?
Yes. So if we're activity oriented, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
tend to see several people engaged or participating in a similar activity. If you're product focused, you're going to end up with one person, and I tend to name them by name, not even if it's part of a consulting organization that's coming in to help us. They'll typically have one leader who's assigned to, manage their commitments to us. So I name the one individual who is responsible. And of course, I'm not talking about one person tasks or products. Of course, one person who's responsible would be consulted or supported by perhaps a small team behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And when the agenda is a given product that perhaps is slipping, that one person who is responsible can bring those other people to the table if it makes sense. But really, there's only one person who I really need the accountability from. And what that
Mm.
does is, you can imagine a project team, many people are participating in different products or activities. Whether they need to all be there at the same time is dictated by what is the product we have on our current agenda for this call, for this meeting, for this issue. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like everyone's doing everything by committee. So that answers your question about how do we utilize our resources as effectively as possible. Yeah, we're a great team and we have a lot of camaraderie and we're getting along great and we collaborate a lot and really well. But we are all very clear on what our responsibility is in the project for a given product or another. That doesn't mean that we can't come to the table to help our colleagues help them get their product completed or our product completed, but who is responsible and who makes the decision about who do we need in which meeting and when, that's pretty clearly determined by what is the product we're talking about now, what's the issue, and who do you want to bring, you being the person who is responsible for its delivery.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, so to summarize, because I do want to explore the universal process modeling procedure a little bit next here. So to summarize, one of the and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and share some of the salient points that I've interpreted from our conversation today. Is when you are embarking on Prince2 methodology, one of there's essentially three salient points that I've interpreted. Number one, you need to have, instead of being activity focused, we want to be product driven. And so that means that's a small but very, very fascinating and important distinction of describing what it is that you together are coming together to accomplish, either individually
Yeah.
or as a team. Everything is a finished sort of micro product
Product.
in that overall project, right?
Leading perhaps to the ultimate product, yes. Yes.
Absolutely. I
And that doesn't mean we're
love
not
that.
driving for benefits or,
Mm,
all those other things, because all of those things will come if we successfully deliver client
mhm.
satisfaction, benefits to our organization, et cetera. But if you don't deliver the product ultimately that you committed to, you're not going to get any of that. Carry on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so and the second thing that I had interpreted is that is the accountability. So you want one spokesperson, if you will, right, on behalf of a mini product team, or maybe again, like if it could be an individual who's responsible for a particular micro product in the overall project, but it's the accountability piece that should answer, is it done yet?
Yes.
Or sorry, what was that? Is it
Is
done?
it done
Or
yet?
that's
If you and I
right.
know what it is
That's
in
right.
our project, we can have a pretty simple
Exactly.
conversation.
Exactly. And I would surmise that this person, because this person is accountable for that particular product, is that that person is also right from the get-go would be responsible for defining what the requirements for that product, that micro product is. We're not talking about the end result of the project, right, as a product, but that what that micro product is, the requirements, and then what the benchmark for success is. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would slightly interpret it differently. I would say rather than
Mm,
what the requirements are,
mm.
what activities are going to need to be performed and how much effort or lift they're going to need to do to achieve that product.
But
So
how do you know
sometimes,
what's good? How do you know that the product is finished? Like, what's the finished definition of the product? Like, when do you establish that?
depends on the type of product. If it's software, let's say a component, a security component on an
Mm,
application that is part of an
mm,
application, let's say single sign-on or something like that, the assigned specialist, to them, that might just be another iteration of the thing they've done 20 times already this year. And so I leave it up to them to figure out how to achieve that security component and, get the SSO or single sign-on component working. And success may, in a software world, may mean, okay, once we've got it into the testing phase, success means your component is working without a failure and few defects or no defects. Other
mm-hmm,
products are more paper-based or analysis to products or consulting kind of products. And success on a paper-based or consulting product, for example, might be a plan, a set of requirements, etc. Success is driven by, is the product that you have produced on paper or the specification, is it good enough to be consumed by its consumer, often the next person in our life cycle in our project, or consumed by the project owner or accepted by? So, for example, some projects don't deliver any software; they just deliver policies, procedures, improvements, etc. And the question then might be, if you delivered a new procedure or policy, has it been accepted, perhaps by the executive or the manager who's accountable for those operations? Is it well enough done that they are willing to accept it because they're going to consume
mm.
it? So, every product, of course, has the product as a customer, I should say, and you need to keep in mind who will consume the product that you have, that you are going to prepare, and is it acceptable to them? So that's how it drives the
Interesting.
quality. That's how it drives the quality.
Okay. Okay. So is there a phase in Prince 2 at the beginning of the project where all of these benchmarks are defined?
That's another feature of Prince 2 is that whereas, Project PMI is a bit more broadly described, it's more generally described. In
Mm.
Prince 2, they actually define what a product is
Mm.
and the concept of a product specification. And there are a number of attributes of a product that support a project manager and a team to understand what it is we're talking about. Who's accountable for producing it? What are its quality criteria? What's its description? And things like that. So at the outset in planning, it's pretty much been sorted out when you talk about a given product, whereas you call it a micro product inside a project, the specialist who's delivering that product and the project manager and then the rest of the team already have a clear understanding what that noun or product means.
Mm, right.
And,
Hmm.
you don't have to write up a piece of paper for every product in a project. You just need consensus and you need to be confident that we both understand what that product is. And so, yes, in Prince 2, it's very prescriptive of what a product is. You can open up the book and you can find out how to describe any given product. And then it's up to you how rigorously you want to document the definition of a product, or
Okay.
how well it's understood by your team.
Gotcha, gotcha. Fascinating. And so the third attribute that I had interpreted is the decision-making sort of factor. And I really love this. It's so simplistic. And that is, number one, is it on the critical path? Yes or no? And number two, if it is not, does it matter?
Yes.
Right? I feel like that's I mean, it's so simple and easy to apply anywhere in the project.
So the beauty of that is not all hiccups are going to cause a panic. And
Hmm.
the same level of, um, all hands on deck or whatever effort, right? Often you have some slack in your schedule. And if something didn't work out as planned, it can take more time. And it's not going to impact our ultimately, by the time we get to the end of job on our project, it will probably be resolved. So if it's not on the critical path, I don't need to spend a lot of time, you know, ch- chasing it down. But if it is on the
Right.
critical path and it will cause, or yeah, and it will cause, a delay, then that tells me it's a bit more important. And as we're getting close to the end of the project life cycle and it's on the critical path, the sense of urgency for resolving issues becomes higher, and
Hmm.
especially high on those that are on the critical path to go live or completion.
Interesting, interesting. So do you find that now, and I know you're an active project manager, right? You are
Yes.
that, yes, at particularly at CWB, is is Prince 2 the primary project methodology that you are using, or are you still, or do you infuse principles and particular parts of Prince 2 into other types of methodologies that are perhaps, because there's somewhat of a culture, even within PMO, with every client that they may or may not be receptive to like something that they're not familiar with, or what do
Mhm.
you think?
So I'm a certified PMP for decades. In our organization, the PMP certification has high value. Um, it's not required that every project manager has a Prince 2 certification, but as I said at the very outset, it has really added power to my
Mm,
ability to deliver successful projects. As we've discussed, the agenda is a slightly different agenda. It kind of tilts the focus. You still end up managing projects from front to back. You still end up planning, executing, controlling, and closing projects. You still end up delivering to a customer. But it has more so given me, and like I said, the two Prince 2 and PMI are very similar in what their principles are, but focus on products changes my day-to-day focus,
hmm.
decision making, planning, issue management, measurement of progress and success. And I would say, in that regard, I don't have to be a disciple of one or the other. It
Hmm.
just tailors my style and
Right.
the chances of success.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant because that means that there's such a low bar that's it's easy to implement particularly product orientation in any sort of project. You don't have to start the project off, Prince 2 methodology and this is what we're going to be doing. You can actually infuse the philosophies of thinking of each part of your projects, or sorry, each part of the tasks and activity of the overall project as little micro products.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And at every level, regardless of which stakeholder you're engaging, whether it's the executive who's going to pay for the outcomes of the project, or a daily stand-up meeting with team members, the question is still focused on it, namely one or another product. And it makes the conversation so simple. Like it starts and finishes with, is it done yet? And if not, or is it on track to be done? And if not, then we have a conversation about how to help.
mhm,
And we still end up doing a life cycle of a project. We still have budgets. We still have schedules. We still have issues and risks. We still have perhaps phases, or we may be doing agile, fine, but the focus is always on what is it, and it really just gets so much more productivity out of the team, and it's a great way to demonstrate your progress, um, and lead to the ultimate end of job.
I
And it doesn't
love
have to
it.
be a software project. It doesn't have to be, it could be a regulatory project. It could be a marketing project. It could be
Hmm.
anything.
I love it. I love it. All right. So, PMs, if you're listening to this, even if you're not a PM, if you are contributing to a project, a lot of our audience are in the IT space and in the project space and the consulting space. I invite you to start to today, no less, I invite you to start thinking about how you can switch the focus, just this tiny little change in how you're thinking about what you have been called to deliver to your clients as finished products within perhaps a larger implementation or whatever have you.
I
That's
would,
fantastic.
yeah, thanks
Mhm.
for reading my enthusiasm about this because as you can tell, I'm excited about it. But I think you just nailed it, Kat. Try to learn how to use it. And you
Mhm.
don't have to follow it, the cookbook or whatever. Try to apply the philosophy and see how it works for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fantastic. So let's switch gears. And speaking about cookbooks, let's talk about it's not a cookbook, but kind of, it might be a cookbook of sorts, right? It's called the Universal Process Modeling Procedure. First of all, what inspired you okay, so what is it? What is it about? Who should care? Who should be reading this? And what inspired you I have so many questions for you.
Okay. I'll try
Start
to make
off
it
with this
fast.
first.
Yeah, so business process modeling or process mapping, number one, it's a core competency of a certified business analyst. Number
Mhm.
two, it's a skill that's used in business process management or business process improvement methodologies. And
Okay.
you can imagine that you can set out to improve an operational process or to define requirements or a workflow for some new process or activities in your organization. And so, you set out with a goal to understand what that process will be or what it currently is, how it might be improved, how it might be automated, digitally transformed, aligned with regulatory compliance regulations, be a requirement for software. You start off with that, but the hard part is how.
Mm.
And so, you know, um, by the way, the concept of process modeling or workflow modeling has been around since the Industrial Revolution, 100 years. And believe it or not, many of the concepts and principles that many business analysts follow are still based on that old time philosophy
Really?
of,
How so?
of well, imagine the Model Ts being constructed or built. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
there's a factory line. The first step completes. Then it's passed on to the next step. The next step is
Mm-mm.
performed. The next step is performed. And that's the way it used to work 100 years ago.
Hmm.
Today, that's not the way it works. Your organization performs activities or produces products or services that
Hmm.
collaborate with other organizations and other departments, not necessarily in a sequential manner. Yet,
Right.
yet all of these activities are performed in collaboration to lead to an expected outcome. And
Hmm.
how does that happen? Kind of like the internet works today. Our technology today is not a sequential series of activities. One service on a server requests services from another server on the internet and gets a response back. And to the end user using, let's say, a website, you're going through one continuous transaction or flow. Let's say buying something on the internet, and you provide your credit card. There's a collaboration there between some banking or credit card services and the sales website and so on. And they're not contained in one quote unquote factory or box. It's a
Mm.
network of services that are collaborating with each other.
That's
Short
right.
answer is today's technology. So we need a way for business analysts to perceive how their business operations work or how their company's operations work that is not founded in the old time paradigm of a factory and a sequential sequence of processing. Today's processes are collaborative networks of services, and you need, as a business analyst, to perceive that and how to model that. So
Mm.
that's principle number one out of the universal process modeling procedure is the modern day paradigm. Because you can imagine as a business analyst, if you don't perceive your organization's processes in terms that can be implemented readily by today's technology, such as digital transformation or services in the cloud, you'll never be able to take advantage of those technologies. And then the second major element of the universal process modeling procedure is, uh, I'm good at project management, for example, because I've been trained and I'm effective because I follow pretty much the same project management techniques that I've learned over time and I've practiced them. And so it's the same for preparing a business process model as a business analyst. You need to have been trained, or I would recommend you don't do it as an ad hoc or novice activity, but that you actually have some training in a proven approach to get from essentially a blank sheet of paper with your stakeholders to the outcome that you're looking for, which is we have consensus on the most effective way of implementing this given business process, and here it is. And by the way, it's not your stakeholders' job to be able to tell you all of the requirements or, give you the answers and you take notes.
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
business analyst's job is to come to the table and lead the journey of discovery by having
Mm-hmm.
a clear method for listening and then documenting the processes that you and your team are about to analyze or develop or define, be they current processes or future processes, be they for regulatory compliance or digital transformation, or as a set of requirements for process improvement or whatever it's going to be. So it's all about, so that's what brought me to writing the book. Today's many analysts are still using 100-year-old modeling techniques and paradigm of what a process is as a sequential flow. Um, and
But aren't they still sequential though? I mean, I get that there's going to be many different ins and outs, but still, it's not, and I 100% agree that it's not completely linear, but there's still some sort of a sequential process to them. Wouldn't you agree?
you can view them sequentially, but what you should be doing is viewing those activities that you might think of it in a sequential process flow as a set of
Mm-hmm.
services that each achieve an expected outcome that enables what you perceive as the next logical sequential step. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really oriented around a service will be initiated in response to an event, like essentially being requested to do something, and
Mm-hmm.
lead to an expected outcome. And the classic example is, you know, I like to tell my students the story about, checking in at an airport. You imagine that as a sequential set of activities. You identify the passenger, you check the reservation, you sign a seat, you check the bag, etc. And you perceive that as a sequential set of steps. But think about today's world. You know, um, I want to get to the airport. I've already checked in online. I have my boarding pass. I want to check my bag. So
Mm-hmm.
if a business analyst has modeled that process as a sequential activity process, it's really not accurate because you don't have to all you have to do is identify the passenger and allow them to check the bag because the outcomes of having checked in and issued
Interesting.
yourself your boarding pass electronically have already been accomplished. And so I could go on and on. Read the book, Universal Process Modeling Procedure, the practical guide to high quality business process models. And as you can tell, I'm also passionate about this topic because it is a game changer for organizations, for business analysts who would otherwise perhaps spend days, weeks, even months in some organizations to model their business activities. And those models go on the shelf because they don't actually reflect how things can or should work.
That's interesting. That's fascinating, actually. So, what you're saying is that using this universal process modeling, you're basically collapsing timeframes and I dare say dollars in an implementation project because of all of the time spent in trying to analyze all of your as is processes. And
Yeah.
instead of, trying to create sequential to be processes, there is a different way to look at it between cause and outcome, or sorry, what was it? Cause and you said outcome
An
and then
expected outcome.
right, cause and expected
Yes.
outcome. That's really, and then that's kind of like it kind of goes back to like thinking of things as an end product as well, kind of.
Well, I'd like to think of it as an outcome. So imagine when you're shopping online and you buy something, you use your credit card, and that
Mhm.
application or that website goes and requests a banking service or a credit card service to process your credit card transaction. There is an expected outcome of that other service, which is just tell me whether the purchase is approved or not, and I'll take care of the
Hmm.
rest. So every
Hmm.
activity in a process does have its expected outcome. And that leads me to the final takeaway I'd like to gift to you and your and your viewers. In the universal process modeling procedure, it's not just describing a discipline to get a process model completed with high quality and how to assure yourself that it's a high quality model. It gives you what I call business process sunglasses, the universal process definition. Now, get this. When I went to school and in the old days, they told me processes transform inputs into outputs. So that leads to, okay, let's identify all the activities or processes and string them together, and we'll call that a process flow. Here's the universal process model, the universal process definition that meets today's technology criteria that can easily be implemented as a network of related services. And that is, any business process is a collection of related activities initiated in response to a business event that leads to an expected outcome for a customer.
Okay, hold on. There are a lot of words there.
Yep.
So,
Four-part definition of what any business process is: a collection of repeatable work activities initiated in response to an event that leads to an expected outcome, and that outcome is consumed by a customer or consumer. It could be another piece of software, it could be another process, it could be a true customer. Four-part definition. And what's the subtle difference between that perception and, a process is something that transforms inputs into outputs? Well, anytime the business analyst perceives the operations going around in their organization, they're looking for the four dimensions. They're looking for, if they can't answer what causes this process to begin, or this activity for that matter to begin, or if they can't answer what is the expected outcome of this activity or this process, and by the way, who or what consumes that outcome, then they don't have the full picture.
interesting. That is a very, very important distinction. Because actually, okay, so now I'm starting to see it. Because when you document a process sequentially, there may or may not be an expected outcome, as you say, right?
There may not be an
Because
apparent one because no one's asked.
that's yeah, well, interesting. That is interesting, and you're absolutely right. It's because, the whole entire activity of mapping out a process is exactly that. Is you start at one point and then you end at a certain point, but you don't actually have an expected outcome or like a
That's
result
Yeah,
of
so I'm excited to answer
necessarily.
that. What you just described, it starts at one point, it ends at another point. That is the old time religion. You see many, many swim lane diagrams, process flow diagrams, and they will literally have a little icon at one end that says start and another icon
Right,
at the other end that says finish or end.
right.
As the business analyst asks the question, what causes this to be performed? What is the expected outcome? Who consumes that outcome? And what's some of the benefit of this? First of all, it's a business analyst's job to ask and and pursue the answers to those questions. It's not the stakeholders who are in the room because they're not the business analysts.
100%.
And number two, for example, a benefit of having that, what I call business process sunglasses on, that view of that paradigm is that, what's the goal of many business process improvement projects or initiatives? Well, let's optimize the process so that it's performed more efficiently or there's less defects or errors. Well, if you start off by perceiving what is the initiating event, and maybe even more importantly, what is the expected outcome of this workflow or process, all of a sudden you're going to tend to focus on getting to the right answer, the right outcome, as opposed
Yes,
to what are the activities we want to perform,
that's
right? So you
right.
might ignore or already optimize your view of a process by understanding that framework.
That's right. I love that because that's interesting because if you are able to identify what your expected outcome or benefit, and you had mentioned benefit there as well. And so
Yeah.
that's very important to understand as well. It may or may the answer, the process that you get to that point may or may not be what you think. What I'm saying is that often when we are called to improve a process, we immediately think, "Oh, how can it be automated? How can we apply technology to support these humans doing their job?" Assuming that it is always the impediment of that process is always the humans. That may or may not be a good assumption. First, secondly, it may or may not be a good assumption to always say automation is the answer, technology is the answer.
You would, if you don't have the right view of the initiating event and the activities that lead to the expected outcome for the customer, you may well end up automating activities that have
That
nothing to do with
don't
that.
care. Right.
Money,
Absolutely.
time, effort, maintenance.
Has been spent, right? And doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Right.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I really, really enjoy this conversation. So, the three things, again, I don't know why I always think in threes, but the three things that I have just interpreted from our dialogue just now is that um, always like when you are thinking about processes, and you can be a BA, you can be, a person
A
who is
manager.
whatever,
Yep.
whatever your position is, we're always doing something that involves something else. We're always doing something that has a cause and a result that affects somebody else. So I inspire you, um, Ed and I inspire you to start thinking again today, what in your throughout your job today, even if it's not even a part of your work that you get paid for, it could be your family or like the way you interact with your spouse, whatever it is. What is the cause? Would you say we should actually begin at the end? So, like, what is the expected outcome and what is the
Yeah.
benefit
It's a
of that?
balance. What
Mm,
is the initiating event that's causing us to do this, or
mm,
requires it to be done? And what is the expected outcome? And then the other two questions deal with who consumes that outcome. Is it really important? And what are the activities that are necessary to get us from the initiating event to the expected outcome? So, for example,
mm-hmm,
Catherine, you called me up one time and asked me to participate in this interview. That was my initiating event. And it has been designed to lead to an expected outcome for your consumers of this podcast. And that outcome is hopefully we've instilled a couple of really important principles in two domains, one for project management called focus on products, and the other one, the universal process definition and the approach, the discipline for developing high quality business process models in today's world, which is the universal process modeling procedure, the practical guide to high quality business process models. A bit of a sales pitch there, but really, those I'm really excited about those two concepts, and I hope that we've raised the excitement for your viewers as well.
Well, I think you've just summarized our previous hour so eloquently. I invite you, so if you're listening to this podcast, if you want to find out more about Mr. Ed Matera, please visit processmodelingadvisor.com, and there you will find his brilliant book, Universal Process Modeling Procedure. And we will put the link in the show notes, and we'll also, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be in the YouTube description. Thank you, Ed. I really appreciated our conversation today. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you about these two very, very passionate topics that you are on which you are a wealth of information. Thank you.